and look forward to tonight's conversation in honor of World Roller Coaster Appreciation Month. We're here and gonna talk about roller coasters. Who is excited to hear about some roller coasters tonight? We are here with Brian Kosmac from Gravity Group, who has brought lots of wooden roller coasters to our lives, something we don't see enough of, in my opinion. And so I'm excited for everybody to get to hear a little bit more about Gravity Group, him and his career. He's got some great stories, so we're gonna have a fun time tonight. So, Brian, will you introduce yourself a little bit and tell people about what your role at Gravity Group is?
Sure. I actually prepared a PowerPoint, and I will flip back and forth if we can. How do we do that on Zoom?
At the bottom, there's a share screen.
Share screen. Oh,
yes.
Screen, not share
make
screen.
Sure that
host disabled participant screen sharing.
I'm checking. I'm going to change it right now that you can share.
Okay. Let me see if I can do this here. Oh boy.
There. Now you should be able to share.
Share. Are you seeing anything?
There it is. Wonderful. Thanks, Brian.
Okay, I am not on this roller coaster. Okay, okay. Here I am. This is the second slide. Can you see the second slide? Am I still sharing?
Yeah, you are.
Okay. For those of you who don't know me, my name is Brian Kosmac. I am an engineer with the Gravity Group. I've been with the company for almost 7 years. I am by trade a structural engineer. What that means is I went to school I went to the University of Dayton, and I got an undergraduate degree, a bachelor's degree in civil engineering, which is basically when you travel on roads, bridges, structures, even wastewater. I had to take a wastewater engineering class. I did not do well in that class. Let's say it had nothing to do with roller coasters, so I did not. There's a lot of chemistry, but then I actually followed my wife. She was going to UC for graduate school, University of Cincinnati. So I decided that I would go get a master's degree from the University of Cincinnati in structural engineering. One background that I have is I actually started in the industry in 2001 at Kings Island. I actually, funny story, I was looking for a job, an internship when I was in college, about a sophomore or junior in college. And I got a letter back from somebody from Premier Rides saying you should work at an amusement park. And I figured, there's one 45 minutes away. So what I did is I went down there, I applied in person to be a ride operator, and they put me on the Beast crew. And there was 2 other rides with the Beast. There was the Shake, Rattle, and Roll, which is still there. And I know I met a lot of Acers at the Flying Eagles, which I think is at Carowinds now. And funny thing is the Flying Eagles, what the Acers would do back when Paramount owned the park, there was a Ace Walkback, which the coaster enthusiasts would be able to get the first ride of the day on the Beast. Now you think they'd ride again and again and again. They would ride the Beast once and then hightail it over to the Flying Eagles, which the line, it did not have the best capacity, but in the mornings it was pretty slow. And they would ride the Flying Eagles for the next hour until it got busy. Again and again and again. That was by far their favorite ride at Kings Island. It's sad that it's not there anymore. I've got a lot of stories to tell. They would do something what they call is snap the cables, which is not really snapping the cables. It's basically the cable would get loose and then tight again, and you get like some airtime. And I remember one time there was 10 tubs, 9 of them were well, actually, I remember one of them that was empty started to rock back and forth. And I thought for sure I'd lost somebody. I hit the e-stop as hard as I could, and I stopped the ride, and I looked around, and there's no one on the ground. I'm like, all right, well, phew, we didn't lose anybody. The Acers that were on that ride were rocking the ride so much that they were able to snap an empty tub. I don't think that's ever been done before, but kudos to them. I was only going to spend 1 year at Kings Island, but then I ended up spending 13 years. So worked my way up to a supervisor on the Beast, and then seasonal area supervisor, manager, and then I was in charge of ride operations for about 6 years. And then started a family, and you work until 3 o'clock in the morning on Saturdays wasn't that appealing anymore. I got to learn about the Gravity Group and made some friends over there, and just networked my way. And one day they're like, come on in. And I started working at the Gravity Group doing UPS labels. Yeah, that's true. An engineering degree doing UPS labels. I was sanding, buffering parts for the trains. And then now I get to worry about whether the ride goes right or left. So I kind of worked my way up to where I get to travel a lot and get to be a part of new installations and new ride design, and get to work on a lot of the older stuff too. And I'll talk about a little bit about that later. My niche is more with the rehabbing the older coasters, and I'll get into that a little bit here later. Oops, I just created a new slide. The Gravity Group was found, for those of you who don't know, we were founded in 2002, so we have been around for 18 years now almost. That is, the guys were, there's 4 owners. There's 3 of them on the left, and then there's the tall one in the middle standing next to me. They actually used to work for a company called Custom Coasters International. And after the 9/11, things kind of took a damper in the amusement park industry, and CCI did not exist anymore, so they were unemployed. They actually worked in their basement as a startup company, and 18 years later, we've designed over 26 wooden roller coasters all around the world. China, Europe, I think we're building one in Australia, the United States. I never get to go on the Ireland trip. There's an Irish coaster that the one owner always gets to go on that trip. I somehow missed any opportunity to kiss the Blarney Stone. Is it the Blarney Stone? But one of these days. We have 7 engineers on staff. There are 2 structural engineers and 5 mechanical engineers. We have 3 folks that are in a production process. There's a lot of production stuff and logistics stuff that has to happen, especially when you're doing business all over the world. We have a shop too that assembles trains and does a lot of other mechanical component stuff. And then when we're building a ride, we have a construction crew of about 15 to 20, depending on the size of the project and the timeline of the project. That's the Gravity Group in a nutshell. You can visit us at thegravitygroup.com for more information. One thing that I want to say is that we're always working. And whether it's at home with my kids building a Lego custom coaster dynamics, Big Dipper, Comet, whatever, or my son Rylan, I built 2 little coasters for them. Over here, I'm riding the Memphis Kiddie Park Little Dipper. I look like I'm really enjoying my time there. And then over here, you can even see, like I said, we're always working. This is one of my coworkers, Jonathan. We're on the Arc de Triomphe in Paris, and the Eiffel Tower is in the background, and we are probably talking about roller coasters. And then this is my boss, Corey. We're on the beaches of Normandy. I think that's Omaha Beach, and I hope that we weren't talking about roller coasters, but I'm sure at some point we did bring something up. So I'm going to unshare my screen for the moment. Like I said, my niche is basically looking at track such as this. This is a ride that is under construction in China. And this morning, my inbox was flooded with pictures of the track. And what I do on my specialty is actually measuring the track with some proprietary equipment and software that we've developed. And then from there, I am able to tell the construction team exactly what, I mean, it's a wooden coaster, so there's a little bit of give and take. It's not like a steel coaster where it's fabricated in a shop and then shipped. There's a lot of craftsmanship, a lot of artistry. I did not say that right, but the trackers are quite the artist. Now, what my specialty is giving those trackers. For example, over here, I don't know if you could see my mouse. There's a little bit of kind of some kind of bump going on right there, and they were asking me, okay, what's going on there? So they measured the track. I was not able to head over to China. They measured the track for me, and I was able to use those measurements and put it into my state-of-the-art design programs. And I was able to say, okay, you might want to move that ledger, to the left a little bit in one direction. It'll make it look a little better. And the whole purpose of that is to make sure your radius of curvature in either the vertical or the horizontal direction is in a smooth shape. Roller coasters in the past, I mean, I could do this within just a couple of hours from across the world. Roller coasters in the past, even 10 to 20 years ago, they did not have the technology and the capability that we have today. So a lot of what I remember reading a story in Ace magazine about how the tracker would use their eye to shape the track. And one issue that you have about that is sometimes your eye might not be right. And what I typically say when I go to an amusement park is, especially in this case, what is up might be down and what's left might be right. So if your eye's telling you exactly, put a ledger down, that might not be right. You might need to rethink it. Let's get some math and science behind it, and let's get some concrete numbers so we can make the right decision. And that's my niche. Like I said, I did this all day today. So even though I might be in quarantine, I am working really, really hard to make sure the roller coasters are running at their best. So I'm going to leave I'll get into some other stuff too, as we ask about, I'm sure we're going to touch about some of the older coasters. And I have a whole slide presented for that too, but I'll unstop the screen here. Stop share. Is that stop share? And Elizabeth, if you have any more questions, I don't know how you want to take this or where you want to go. I'd rather get all the new stuff kind of out of the way first, and then we could talk about the old stuff.
Okay.
Herb Schmecks and the John Allens and the Curtis Summers.
The great inspirations, huh?
The inspirations. I have not looked at a John Miller coaster, unfortunately, and I don't think there's a LaMarcus Thompson. Oh, I'm going to eat those words here in a little bit when I get those questions. They're going to be like, Brian, there is a LaMarcus Thompson coaster somewhere out there. I just don't know where it is. So, and I have not been on it. So
I haven't called in for help yet.
not yet. Yeah, someone's gonna correct me though. So, and I'm all for it. So fire away, Elizabeth.
So tell me a little bit about what makes a gravity group coaster special. Why choose to build a gravity group over other options?
Well, when it comes to a gravity group coaster, and I don't have any real pictures of them, but it's airtime more than anything. The trains that we have are developed for low maintenance on the track. There's a steering component to it, and my son here, we have Legos here, and your traditional roller coaster train, the wheels, these are just static wheels, but they will articulate, which the back wheel will actually go like that and like that around a wooden coaster. So when you ride a ride like the Beast doesn't even have articulated wheels. The Beast, when it goes through down the first drop and around the turn, it's actually, using the train is actually flexing to make it around that turn. And there's some give and take around that turn and some what we call slop in the engineering world that allows it to go around that circle. But that's hard on the track. And the Timberliner allows it to steer. So it's more like a steel roller coaster. So there's a lot less wear and tear on the track. So from a park standpoint, that's what makes a gravity group roller coaster is the steering. Now the airtime, we have a restraint. It's that kind of sits on your belly, and it's very accommodating to a lot of guests. It's a lap bar. I'm sorry, it should sit on your lap. But it is what they call a class 5 restraint. And there's different class restraints, and there's a whole scientific study done by a third party called ASTM that does a lot of testing. And there's like a class 1, which is like no restraint. Class 2 is like a seatbelt, and all the way to class 5. A class 5 restraint allows you to have optimal airtime, where your body's getting pushed into the restraint. And we try to use that as much as possible. My favorite, gravity group coaster is probably, it's a tie between the Kentucky Flyer and the ZDT's Switchback. Now, the one thing about the Flyer is it has air. It's only about 50, 45. Someone's going to correct me too. And I helped design the thing, and I don't know the size of the ride, but it's only about 45 feet tall. But you're in the restraint with airtime quite a bit. And we always like to say that when you have a baby, you throw them up and you catch them. That's airtime right there. And so if a baby loves it, adults will too. So does that help? Does that answer the question?
That's so true. Kentucky Flyer is just packed full of airtime. It is all about that. And it's an interesting ride because you get to watch, it's a family ride that has a lower height requirement. So it enables families and young children to let it be one of those early coasters in their life. And that's something I think y'all have focused a lot on, is keeping your height requirements low.
We absolutely, and it's my now 7-year-old, when we were working with Sesame Place to develop the, let me go back to my share screen here. Where is the shares? Okay, here we go. If I go back to, am I sharing it? Oh wait, no, I'm not. Come on, share. I can design roller coasters, but when it comes to sharing Zoom meetings, I don't know. But so this is the this is the Sesame Place.
Wacky Taxi.
Wacky Taxi, yes. And what Sesame Place really wanted to make sure that there was a lower height requirement on this ride. I think it's 40 inches. I'd have to check I live in a world of older roller coasters sometimes, so I think it's a 40-inch height requirement. But what we did is my 7-year-old, who was probably 5 at the time, he was right around 39 inches. So we actually threw him in the restraint to give him, and we like coached him with candy to try and get out of the restraint. And we actually modified the restraint to make sure that he wasn't able to get out of it. And it took him to get out of that restraint at the 42-inch requirement, which it was. He had to take his leg, wrap it around. I shouldn't even tell you how to do it, but it would take him about a good minute and a half. He'd have to wrap it around his body and then somehow get himself out. It was quite the process. So we were pretty confident that a 40-inch height requirement was going to be doable, but we had to kind of figure out how to keep him from coming out, even though the ride would have been over by the time that he managed to get out. But what we did is we actually put a stopper in. There's a pad here, and then there's a pad in the seat. We found out that he was able to take his foot and kind of slide it underneath in between those two pads to get out. We put a stopper there, and he couldn't get out. He was so sad when he realized he couldn't, because his whole job was to get out, and that was his, he's 4 or 5, he doesn't know any better. So he just, it was ice cream after that trip to the office. So, but it was quite an interesting way of doing it, because you could do all the math in the world and all the drawing in the world, but doing it in real life, we were able to really see exactly what was going on through his mind and exactly how a kid would be able to get out. I'm confident that there is no way. I mean, it's a pretty minimal restraint. You're out there, but it's a very well developed restraint, and you're in there. So that's my story about the 40 inches here. So even my kids, they're always working.
That must have been a wonderful day at work to get to share it with your son, though.
They love it, they go and they start spinning wheels in the shop, and they're probably not allowed in there anymore. There's probably too much other stuff going on, but it's been a while since they've visited, but they love it. They think it's fun. So they'd rather go to Kings Island. Don't get me wrong. There's more to see in an amusement park than in my office, but that was kind of fun. Except the 4th or 5th time, they're like, "This stinks, Dad. I don't want to do this anymore. I'd rather stay home and play." So
we were talking about the wide range of products and choosing the right one for the park.
Oh yeah, okay. Well, a lot of parks, when it comes to, for example, Hades, the Mount Olympus had worked with custom coasters in the past, and they had a lot of a good relationship with them. So when it came to building Hades, it was kind of like, okay, where do we go from here? A lot of it's hard to tell exactly what the park wants, because sometimes they change their mind so much. With a big corporate park, they might want one thing, and then they'll see the dollar amount, and then they might say not so much. A lot of it just depends on what they're looking for and how much money they have. So we're more economical than, say, a B&M coaster. So, and we're a little bit more family friendly than, a B&M's just amazing, but a lot of it just depends on what the park's looking for. ZDT, they actually came up with the concept of the switchback. Danny from ZDT actually I think his son was like, well, why don't we, instead of it being a shuttle coaster, why don't we have a lift hill and have the switch track, halfway through the coaster at the bottom of the drop. So oftentimes they get a lot of, the parks do have a lot of input in what they want. So a place like Holiday World, they had once again done work with CCI and had developed a great relationship with them, and were able to work on that huge roller coaster called the Voyage, which is running wonderfully this year. So it just depends. The Chinese parks, there's a company called Martin and Vlemix who does a lot of the contracts with those parks. So what they do is we just do the engineering part of it. So what they'll do is they'll work with the parks. They have a Chinese interpreter who will essentially work with them on developing the coaster. A lot of times what we start out with is completely different than what they end up with. So I don't know if that helped you answer your question or not. It's a very vague one because it's a very vague process. It's a lot different than I ever thought it would be.
So I imagine that Martin Vlemix goes back and forth with you with their proposal to figure out what's realistic in developing the proposal, and then they act as the sales team in a
Correct.
sense.
Yes.
Okay.
For our overseas stuff in China, and in Asia and in Australia, they sell the coasters there. We only have 10 people in the office. We are not set up for the type of stuff that they have to go through to get stuff in and out of China. The southern yellow pine, which is the wood that we use on just about it. I mean, Rocky Mountain uses it, Great Coaster uses it. That's the wood they use, is southern yellow pine, and it's actually out of the same company in Atlanta. And then we actually MVR will import that to China, and the logistics to get that done are mind-blowing. And I'm not trying to plug the coaster. I would not want to have anything to do with that. God bless them. It's harder than probably designing the coaster itself. The logistics that are involved there are insane. I mean, just getting stuff to France this past year, we did some about 1,100 feet of track on an existing roller coaster in Paris, and there was a lot of stuff that had to happen to make sure that everything was lined up before you even get to the stuff gets to the site. It's unreal. All the logistics and all the stuff that happens behind the scenes, outside the engineering, to get stuff to work out. So, but we do all our construction in the United States and in Europe. We'd be happy to do some in South America. I don't even think there's any wooden roller coasters in Africa. Somebody's going to correct me on that. I know it. But and I'm not sure where we would be there, but it's quite a challenge logistically. So
We can only imagine what it takes to navigate all those channels that's required. And for everyone watching, if you're curious to learn more about Martin and Vlemix, if you check out our Facebook page, there's an interview with them that we did during IAAPA in 2019 that you can still view there, to hear some insight from them about their side of the business of wooden roller coasters.
Who'd you talk to from there?
Chuck
Bingham. Gotcha.
Yes.
Yep.
Had a wonderful interview with him.
Was he walking around okay at the time, or
It was post-trip, so he was using powered wheelchair.
Yeah.
Yes, but we had a great interview with him. I had so much fun getting to meet him and learn more about the company. So talking about those older roller coasters, so you get to dive in and help them be a better ride experience is your
Absolutely.
primary role.
Yep.
Can you tell us any more about what you've been working on or what we can experience from the past you worked on?
I will talk to you about some of the stuff that let me share my screen again. I'm gonna struggle through this. Hopefully I won't turn off the audio. But all right, am I sharing it?
Yes, looks good.
All right. This is me standing on top of Racer 75. And what we did, I think this was 2017, 2018. The ride was just needed some, basically what happens is a lot of parks, they will develop some roughness in the ride, or they'll be seeing a consistent problem. For example, maybe there's some splintering in the wood, or there's just a consistent problem, and they're unsure. They've done everything they can to try and remedy the problem. My goal is to try and figure out what is causing that problem and to minimize it as best I can, and maybe even make some improvements to the ride. Racer 75, the top of the lift hill, was actually, there was some bounciness going on up there, all the way down into the valley. And I don't want to really get into, you know, park specific stuff, because it's kind of like, it was tired. It was an old tired coaster, and we were able to take off basically the top 2/3 of the ride. It's quite an undertaking. And then we basically reprofiled ever so slightly the first drop. And then we actually worked on the back turn here the following year, which turned out really well. But what's going on when you're on these, this is a John Allen coaster, and there was basically 2 drawings with this ride when it first was built. There was a plan drawing, and then there was a profile drawing. And I'm not sure exactly how John designed the coaster, but he probably didn't have the same type of computer programming that I have, or the Gravity Group has today. So what he did was he instead of using, you know, there was some rule of thumbs that he had, and instead of looking at, you know, each bent and each, you know, specific, you know, radius of curvature, he probably had used some arcs or parabolas, and was able to kind of just form it that way. And then he gave those plans to the coaster design, the coaster constructors, and they might have, you know, did their own thing with it. But there was some rules of thumb. For example, there is a lot of these old coasters have what, like, in between, what they call a ledger. And a ledger is, if you have, it's these long pieces right here. You can kind of see them in this coaster here too. And they used to be 9 feet apart. And what happens when it's 9 feet apart, and let me unshare, let me stop my sharing here. I've got my Legos here. So you have traditional wood roller coaster train. You have a 9-foot span from here to here, and then from here to here. So what happens is, you can, when the train goes over it, you can push down on it. Well, now the board's going down, but you can push down on, oh, I just broke it. But over time, that section there starts to, you know, get bouncy. So when you're riding the coaster, it starts to bounce up and down like that. Now what we do on new coasters is we actually get rid of that 9-foot span, and we'll make it smaller. I know, this is quite the physics. This is how I design roller coasters, by the way, using Legos. But you push down on it, and it has a lot more strength. It's basic physics, basic statics for you engineers out there watching. So let me go back to my screen. So when we did the Racer 75, you could see these ledgers are a lot closer together. And that is to keep that what we call the bounciness or the sagging in between tracks at a minimum. This right here, this is Excalibur at Funtown in Saco, Maine. And they were having a little issue in one of these corners here where the train was just hitting it. And they tried quite a bit to get it to fix it, but sometimes they would just repair one side of the track, and then but the issue is actually on the inside of the track. So I came in here and I said, okay, well, why don't we, rebank it just ever so slightly to take the G's a little bit off, and then we actually did some unique little changes that I can't explain here to the center line to help ease the transition from coming in to coming out here. Even 10 to 20 years ago, when you were going into a straight, if you had a straight piece of track and then you'd go into a curve, you'd have, no radius of curvature at all. And then you'd suddenly go into, this is probably a 60-foot radius of curvature. Say you're driving in your car and you're coming around a curve, and it's a tight curve, you either have to slow down, or there's got to be, say you're getting off the highway, that curve is large, and then it starts to get smaller as you get closer into the curve. On older coasters, even on the Racer 75 back in the far corner there, you'd go from a 60-foot radius to an infinity curvature of radius. So there would be you'd basically be on your side and then you'd be in the straight. So what we try to do is try to ease that transition into the curve, and that saves wear and tear on the trains. It makes for a better ride experience, and it helps the track out too. This is the Kemah Boardwalk Bullet going down the first drop. We do work on that every year, and it's a fantastic ride. I have not been we just redid the first drop on it this year. I did not get to ride it, but my boss Chad, I think I was in Paris actually, but I did a lot of the legwork, and I like to say he goes and delivers the baby. So I'm like the nurse. So he went down there and he basically, went to the wrap-up meeting and rode the ride, said it was great, and then left. Like, that's great, Chad. Thanks for helping me out. A couple other rides. This here is Canary Day Zeus, which is right outside of Paris. We did the first drop and a turn, and we actually did some more work on it this year. It was an old CCI ride that was designed by my boss, Larry Bill. This one here, you could probably tell. This is, you know which one this one is? Elizabeth, can you guess? That one. The Voyage? You're on mute. Now you're on mute again. It's the Voyage. It's the Voyage. Yes, it's the Voyage. Holiday World is actually, it's the last 5 or 6 years, they've done about 500 to 600 feet of retracking on the ride. And even just from 10 years ago, this section of track outside the lift hill the train was kind of bouncing up and down the track here. And we actually rebanked this turn maybe just a couple degrees, and we changed the radius of track just a little bit. You would never know the difference in the ride experience except for it being a lot smoother. And that's kind of the goal that we're going for. We're trying to make sure there's a lot of little things that you can do to a wood coaster and retracking it that will help the ride out, the experience of the ride, as well as the longevity of the ride too. They did another, Chad, unfortunately I was in Paris again. My boss Chad got to ride this thing just a couple weeks ago. He said it was running really good. This is Zeus at Mount Olympus. And we did kind of the same thing. We retweaked some of the track here, rebanked it, and helped out some of the curves. So yeah, this was fun. Zeus and then Canary Day Zeus. At one point, I didn't know which coaster I was working on, but overall, it turned out well. So a couple things that let us, why they come to us to look at what's wrong with the wood coaster. This is, if you look here, you can kind of see that the track is kind of bouncing back and forth. And a lot of times parks will try and add what they call a bolster or an intermediate bent in between this. This is that 9-foot span I was talking to you about again. And 9 foot's just a typical, that's just what they did. So a lot of times they'll try and just stabilize the track, but you still have this bumpiness going on. And sometimes they'll try and move a ledger around too. I think this ledger here, this is that 12-foot support that the track's on. You can tell it's kind of shaved into the track there. And that just changes the elevation of the ride in the long run. You also see over here, and this is typical of a lot of older wood roller coasters, is sometimes when you're coming in and out of one of those curves where you're going from a negative, like a small radii to no radii, you'll get what they call, I'm not sure I know what the term is, but it's not the best term. But there's like some push in of the lip of the track here. And that's just the train fighting the turn here. And that's another reason why when that happens, you kind of lose the gauge. So parks will see that when the gauge gets beyond a certain point, they'll come into me and say, okay, what's exactly going on here? A couple other things that we see that they call us in to help out is, for example, this is the footing. You could tell that the strap is not in the center of the footing there. And this is probably a 30-year-old coaster. And they actually put an eccentricity on the footing, and you can tell it's kind of leaning the one direction. Right here, and that's, I mean, that you'll see that, and it's safe to ride, but it's all just wear and tear, typical wear and tear on a roller coaster, kind of like your car. They'll need updates and fixing here and there. Right here, there's a little bit of a crack on this post, and that's probably something that had to do with some irregularity in the track up top. And the park actually put another post next to it to secure it. So that's perfectly fine. Causing that to happen. And that's when they call someone like myself in to really dive into it and see why that's happening. So what I do is I'll go on the track and I'll measure the track. I am not allowed to talk about those secret programs. Someone much smarter than me developed these programs. But what I'm able to do is basically measure the entire track and then see where, measure the radius of curvature, and basically use physics and engineering to figure out where that track needs to go to make it a better ride. After we figure all that out, what we'll do is this is for a full retracking job. They'll take all the track off. Sometimes we'll put in new ledgers. For example, this ledger here, they used to develop cracks in it at one point, which is fine. They had an eye on it. But at this point, we were able to see that there was a higher load at that spot. So we actually put a steel piece of reinforcement underneath that ledger, so they'll never have to worry about it ever again. And then also what I'll do is I'll get pictures like this, or I'll get to visit the job site when the track's in this situation. I'll measure it again and make sure everything's going in the right, no pun intended, the right direction. But every once in a while, what I'll do is we'll get a picture like this, where you can tell that that's not even right there. So what happens is the crew, this is Aubrey, right? And he's looking at me and he is about to punch me because he's like, Brian, in nicer words, he's like, Brian, something's not right here. Is it you or is it me? And I'm like, well, let me check my numbers. And I'm like, all right, Aubrey, we'll figure it out, especially in these old coasters, when they take the track off, the structure will start to move a little bit. And maybe here I just missed my measurement. I'm only human. But we were able to catch it and fix it. So instead of Aubrey, ready to punch me in the face, he was going to give me a hug. No kisses though. And this is pre-COVID-19. So my boss said I should put a face mask on us now, but that's not, he's a fun-loving guy. I really like working for him. But and then after that, once we start putting layers of track down, we will try and keep the gauge at a specific point. And it's pretty typical for all wood coasters. It's ironic how the same gauge from the John Allen coaster, the Big Dipper at Geauga Lake, is probably pretty much the same as the gauge on this is Canary Day Zeus at Park Asterix. And then what we'll do is we'll check it again, and then we'll check it again. And we have, I'll go out there and I'll measure it again in this state too, put it in my numbers. And by this time I can really tell whether or not the coaster is going to run really well. And then what we do is we test it, and I will look at acceleration data. Let me stop my sharing here because that's the end of my slide here. But we'll test the accelerations of the coaster and how it affects the human body. And it'll either be, the coaster will either go, there's an X acceleration, which is forward, backward. There is a side to side acceleration, which, shakes you back and forth. And then there is the up down acceleration, which is airtime. And we'll measure that to make sure that there's no irregularities. And we'll measure it again and measure it again and then we'll actually get to test ride it. And test riding it is actually, when I was at Park Asterix just this previous time, I'm one of the first people to get on it and actually test it. And I am, when I go on a job site, I feel like if I could see it, if I could see the problem, if I can, feel the problem when I ride, and if I could see it in my numbers and the accelerations that I take, then we're going to head in the right direction on coming up with a solution for the ride. So that's my take on the existing coasters. I hope I didn't bore you to death. So.
Not at all. And we have a question from the field that's wondering if you worked on the Twister project at Grona Land.
Well, the Twister project, my company did. I have not. I was not able to be a part of that. That was 2012, and I started in 2013. And here's the funny thing is my boss, Corey, the tall one, there's two parks. We joke about this all the time, and hopefully he never watches this, because he is the only one who ever goes to Ireland and Sweden. No one else, I think maybe once or twice, but like Chad Miller, our like head designer, has never, I think he's never been to the Irish park, I believe. And I don't know if that's by design, Corey's design, but I'm like, I've unfortunately never actually had any involvement in that ride. I've heard it's a terrific ride though. I would love to ride it one of these days. If you can email Corey Keeper and say, send Brian to Sweden, he'd probably take you up on it in this point in time. Probably not, but I would love to go one of these days. I heard it's light at like 3 o'clock in the morning there though. So yeah.
So looking at all these older coasters, if there was one you could rebuild that's no longer with us, y'all took on Switchback at ZDTs. Is there anything else y'all would like to recreate?
Oh, that's a good question. A lot of that comes from rides that I loved growing up. When I grew up 45 minutes from Cedar Point, and when I was a young, teenager or earlier than that, we did coaster trips. My dad would go all around and ride rides. The one roller coaster that I really, had a passion for and really loved, and the Big Dipper was a lot of fun, but the Screeching Eagle at La Swordsville Lake, I was lucky enough to ride it one year, and it blew my mind. It was absolutely amazing. But that would probably be number one on my list. I also like the ones that, I like the Grizzly at King's Dominion, minus that big fan turn, which it's just a little bit slow up there. You kind of lulls you to sleep, but then it decides that it's just going to go nuts. Like it's just going to go. And I know it's a tired coaster right now, but once you get through that little tunnel and that little air time, oh wow, I think that ride's fantastic. So if I could recreate something similar to that, that's just my personal favorites. I love the Raven. I love something that I call them power coasters, where you could feel the power of the ride. And that's just my personal opinion. But that's a good question. So I'll have to take that up on some of that last those little dips on the Raven before you head into the station. I just love that. It's like you're dancing. So
some wonderful attributes those coasters have. And then y'all have some new projects this year, but all your new projects are overseas.
That's correct. We are working currently on a ride in a park called, I don't even know what the park's called, but it's in a city called Jinan in China. And it's Martin of Lemix is doing the construction, and we are doing the engineering of the ride. And as I shared with you earlier, I wake up on a Sunday morning with, photos upon photos of the ride and a lot of data that I have to sift through. So we're working on that, and they're full go right now. They had some, I don't know where they are. I think they're on schedule. I'm not privy to any of that stuff, so I shouldn't say anything. I'm not sure if the whole pandemic situation helped them or hurt them. Australia is starting to kick off. There's a ride in SeaWorld off the Gold Coast that I have not had much participation in that ride yet. I'm sure I will, but they're just starting to kick off over there. And that's another Martin and Lemix ride. This past year, I had been working with Holiday World on a few things. I had been working with Fun Town on a few things, Kemah Boardwalk I get a lot of repeat customers. Park Asterix was the big hitter here. We did 1,100 more feet of track on that ride, and instead of just retracking it, they really wanted to do something different. And there is quite a few interesting features to the ride when it gets to open. I think it opened today, but I was just in Paris, France about 2 weeks ago, trying to get that 25-year-old ride up and ready. And it ended with champagne under the coaster and a hug from the general manager in the world of social distancing. So it worked out all right. It's a 25-year-old ride, but I think it used to be a top 10 coaster. And wow, I could see why. But we did some modifications to it that hopefully there'll be videos online and stuff. And I'm sure it'll all be in French, so no one will be able to understand it. But it's really an awesome ride. It's really found a second life. So
We'll be able to decipher it from the happy screams.
Probably, yes, those French happy screams. So, did you know there's a statue of Canary Day Zeus? And he is about 30 feet tall, and he is wearing a skirt. And when you're in the queue and you walk under, you get to look up his skirt. I am not going to say what's under the skirt, but you can look it up online. And he's not a la nude, by the way. He is wearing some underwear, but I will let all of you go and look. So it should be rated G. I don't know. For all of you parents out there with younger kids, but it's the French have quite a bit of humor. That is a lot of it's pretty funny. So
That's great. But that's one component that makes these rides even more special. When you take in theming and those extra attributes like statues and the queue line, that's what really takes a ride from great to unbelievably fantastic. It makes it memorable.
Yeah. They do a good job. They love their Canary Day Zeus. It's a lot like the Beast, I think. It's their Beast. There's only maybe 3 or 4 wood coasters in all of France, and there's hundreds of amusement parks in that country and all throughout Europe that you and I have never even heard of. And they but there's only 4 wood coasters there, and they love their Zeus. They really do. It's like the Beast. You gotta ride the Beast, and of course they gotta ride the Zeus. So
That's wonderful. And speaking of some of those older projects, we have a question from the field about the Voyage that you were talking about, stating that the last car was removed. Is there any possibility of tweaking or conversation to bring that last car back?
I'm not privy to those conversations. Yeah, I don't know. Probably not, but I don't know. I don't even know what year it was removed. So that was before my time. Yeah.
So also from the field, they're asking, how long does it take from the concept and conversation with the park till the first riders step on a ride typically?
It just depends on how motivated the park is. For example, the ride at Fun Spot in Orlando, I think the contract was signed in November at the IAPA event, and the ride opened up in late June, early July. So that we're talking a 9-month turnaround from concept to actual riders. A ride like the Sesame Place ride, since you're working with a bigger corporate park, that was probably 1.5 to 2 years out, where there's a lot more process to it, where the parks, since it's a corporate park, they have a plan in place and they need to follow the plan, whereas a Fun Spot or some of the smaller parks might be a little different. It just depends on how motivated the buyer is. So
makes sense, because I imagine that the faster the project's done, possibly the more expensive it is too, because you're bringing in more workers.
Sometimes that's a hit or a miss. I mean, you're going to get, and I don't run the labor numbers as much as some of my bosses do, but in my experience, it seems like whether you drag it out or get it done all at once, it usually just, it's all a wash. Some of it's just trying to get the labor. I mean, working 9 months in the Florida sun might not be, work is work, but you're away from your family. It's not even when I'm on the road and it seems like it's my dream job, there's times that you're even just for weeks at a time or a week at a time, it can be draining on you. I mean, we opened a ride in New Hampshire the Rorosaurus, and I think there was like 8 feet of snow or something like that. So a lot of it just depends on the labor. If you can get, you know, if you have, 3 projects going on at the same time, you want to make sure that your companies are, you're able to meet that demand. There's not a whole lot of wood coaster companies in the world. And that skill set is it's an artistry. It's so I'm able to give them dimensions and everything that I can to help them out. But I mean, I remember on the race for 75, I took a nail, and I'm like, I got what they call a 20 penny nail, which is a big nail. I'm like, this can't be hard to hammer this into the wood. And I'm like, no one's looking. Let me give it a try. So I take a big hammer and I go, and it flies, like it just flew off the coaster in no man's land, and it's sitting underneath the ride right now. And then I see like 3 of our construction guys looking at me, and I'm like, you didn't see that. This is why you hammer and I don't, because I don't know how to do it. So, but they appreciate, they appreciate, Aubrey, as much as he wanted to beat me in the side of the head. You're on the front line with them, you're working with them. And in any construction, in any engineering, there's it seems like I'm problem solving, just about all the time. And what's good on paper, what looks good on paper, sometimes when you put it into reality, it's you got to figure out. But we provide them hundreds and hundreds of drawings, but there are things that tend to not go the right way. So that's a good question. Yeah.
So you touched on COVID-19 a little bit. How has it affected business for y'all? How have you had to change business?
I think that the whole industry is going to be recovering for a while from this. I can't really give any specifics. The last 2 months for me have been real busy. For example, we were finishing up Canary Day Zeus, and the crew had to fly back home before we were able to fully get a train running around the track. So for the last 2 months, I've been working remotely with the park in troubleshooting a lot of different stuff with the ride. And then eventually they were able to get the okay to fly myself and my boss to France, to make sure that everything is going to finish up the commissioning of the ride. Luckily, we've been able to diversify, and since we were able to have Martin and Vlemix, work in all throughout the world, we were able to have a job in, the China job and the Australia job are helping us through this. Right now, it's hard to tell exactly what the future holds. I'm hoping that wood coasters are not as expensive as not as big. I mean, I have a $30 million B&M roller coaster in my backyard that I see. I'm literally 2 miles away from Orion, and it hasn't. I'm sure it's had passengers, but it's just sitting there, and you feel kind of hopeless because you want, even though a competitor may have built that ride, if that park's making money and their sister parks are making money, then it all flows down, and the parks are more than willing to purchase new rides. And so there's a great deal level of uncertainty. I'm hoping parks would, try and look at a more economical ride than, Orion looks amazing, don't get me wrong. I've seen this thing in action in person. There's like a retirement community behind the park, and And I was biking over there, and I had to stop and look at these trains just fly by. It's real quiet too. But you would hope that maybe they would have those people that might have had their heart set on a $30 million ride might take a, that's like 3 or 4 gravity group rides. They might decide to look elsewhere. But right now I'm not able to predict where it goes. I got back from Paris a week ago. I'm still kind of digesting, what's going on, but I've been busier than busy. But you guys haven't been riding roller coasters. So, they're out there, they're ready to be, I know these parks want to open up. I've talked to several of them and they're ready to go. We'll get through this though. I lost you. You're on mute.
I keep muting myself. I always have weird noises in my house. It gets super loud whenever
That's all right.
Get online. So what's been your most challenging project you've worked on through your career?
For me, it's been this Canary Day Zeus that just happened. For starters, they kept changing, the park kept changing the scope of what they wanted to do. So I kept having to really, luckily I've been in the last 2 years or so, I've been really involved in the ups and downs and the lefts and the rights and the banking and so that's kind of a dream come true. But with that comes the burden you have of, well, is this ride gonna stink? Or it seems like when I've been working on designs, and I kind of talked to Chad and Corey, who are the 2 main designers, and they know a lot more than I do. But I was like, when you just quit, like you change it and then you change it again and you tweak it again and then you try and figure something out. Especially if you have a blank slate on a new ride, and suddenly you're just like, all right, pencils down. I don't have any more time, but this ride, they wanted changes, up until October, and we were starting to do some retracking in December. And that's a quick turnaround for as many 1,100 feet of track with the major enhancements that they have for the ride. Plus there's nothing that was typical on an older coaster. Each bent was that 9-foot spacing. We have a lot of computer programs that kind of auto do stuff for us, auto engineer it, and not for a 25-year-old or like a Racer 75. There is nothing like that. So you really have to make sure, even just from the bent numbering, they had a one bent that was numbered off. And that through, I had to make sure the construction team knew that, or they would put all the dimensions at the wrong bent. So that was challenging. And then there was a French protest at the beginning of the year. So our lumber didn't show up on time. Luckily, my boss took care of that. Because I don't know what I would do there. I had a knee injury. I had surgery on my knee back in December. So part of what I do is I climb coasters. So I wasn't able to do that. Now it sounds like a sob story, right? But and then COVID-19 happens, and there's just uncertainty with the ride, and eventually it ended up with champagne and hugs underneath the coaster. But for me personally, maybe that's because it's fresh off my mind. That has been one of the harder projects for me. I talked to Chad earlier and asked him about what his favorite project was, the ZDT ride. And I think that was because it was just so unique. And I remember standing there with Danny underneath one of those buildings that are 100 years old. And he's like, Brian, I just wanted to go right through here. And Chad like had a little grin on his face, and I was still kind of, I hadn't had as much experience under my belt, but I think he was loving every second of it. Now his hardest one was the other one in Texas, the Boardwalk Bullet, because it was just from a design standpoint, it was such a complex, such a compact layout that, he had to get there's so much going on with that ride. The fact that you're able to get 3,000, someone's going to correct me on that too, feet of track in that little bit of area, it's truly remarkable. So
that is a well packaged coaster there.
It's a well packaged coaster. It really is. It really is. And I get to hear stories about, it's kind of unique how I get to hear the stories of the CCI days and even the Curtis Summer days. I'll hear stories from the owners, and like the Boardwalk Bullet, there's like a sidewalk there that there's a couple parking spaces, and Chad tells me, this parking space wasn't supposed to be there. I was supposed to have 10 more feet in this area, and then it went away. But a lot of things that when you do pitch a first concept, sometimes it never happens. So it doesn't turn out the way you think it's going to turn out.
Well, we have a few questions. Earlier, you touched on your career a little bit and how you got involved in the industry. We have a few follow-up questions. And for anyone that joined us late that wants to hear more, we will be posting this afterwards so that you can go back and listen to the beginning again and keep savoring all Brian has to share about the industry and all his great stories. From somebody who is a future mechanical engineer, wondering if you have any other tips for getting recognized and included into the industry.
Oh boy, I got lucky with the way that I really got into it, and everyone's got a different story about how they got into the industry. And the one thing that I want to say is there's thousands of jobs out, when you go to IAPA, if you just look around, there's thousands upon thousands of opportunities, and don't sell yourself short. Find something that you want to do. If for some reason designing a roller coaster doesn't work out, for me, I'd always been interested in failures, as scary as that sounds. Something about the Minneapolis bridge a couple years ago, I was all over trying to figure out why that, if it hadn't been what I do now, I would love to be doing that. And a lot of it's just the problem solving that's involved with the engineering. But don't sell yourself short. It's a very hard experience. It's hard to get into the industry. I mean, I have been with the Gravity Group 7 years. They've hired with the company. So we don't hire a whole lot of engineers. Don't be afraid to reach out to our competition, and do whatever you can. When I started working at the Gravity Group, I only worked there 3 days a week. They weren't quite sure what they were getting with me. I was doing UPS labels the world. I never would have thought I'd be doing what I do. I love it, but then again, it's I'm always working. Reach out to whoever, I think getting a job in an amusement park really helped me out. I know that's not everyone's cup of tea. You have to drink the Kool-Aid. But to me, that was instrumental in my networking, because at some point the Gravity Group was asking me for suggestions on developing the trains, and I was a charge of ride operations. So I had a little bit of experience with how lap bars are checked. That's going to be interesting, how they check lap bars now. I don't know if they're wearing gloves or anything. I was talking to one of my former colleagues who is the general manager at American Dream. Is that the one in? He's gonna smile when I say this, but we were talking about how and he used to work at Canada's Wonderland, and we used to hold competitions, Behemoth and Diamondback, on who can get the most riders in an hour, and I think the Americans won each and every time. Yeah, I don't quote me on that because he's probably looking me. He's probably listening right now. Hi, Chris. But you be a whole different ball game when we get back. Just be patient. But anyways, work at an amusement park, or if you're an engineer, get an internship. Whether it's something you want to do or you don't want to do. I was a surveyor at a construction company for an intern for a couple years, and Dan's. I mean, I can't tell you how much of that I use on a daily basis. I didn't touch upon that, but there are things I probably use more from my co-op and internship than I do in my schooling. But I'm sorry, I just got a text message. It distracted me, and I need to throw him, aside. But it's probably Chris. But don't. And then get your engineering and training. Take the FE, and then whenever you can, take the PE. Get a professional engineer. Even if you don't ever use it, if you don't ever stamp anything, if you put professional engineer in your signature, whether you're in the United States or outside the United States, it puts a whole different level to your name. Don't throw your books away. Don't throw those college books away.
So what made you?
I've got my dynamics book right here.
What made you choose civil engineering over mechanical? We commonly hear about people who want to go into design of roller coasters being mechanical engineers. What was that difference for you?
For me, it was I found bridges and roads a lot more fascinating than a sprocket. And if I failed to become a roller do something that I wanted to do. So that's what it comes down to. I hear a lot about that too. There's a lot of civil engineering in roller coaster design. There's a lot of mechanical engineering in roller coaster design. I could go into a whole different presentation about that, but I have to say that as a structural and civil engineer, I am fully prepared to do what I do. So I understand the lingo and the terms, and I could see why. I mean, the roller coaster, the ledger, a lot of the terms are shared from railroad terminology, which is basically civil engineering. And I can't talk about a steel coaster. I don't have as much experience, but a lot is from old railroads, and John Allen and John Miller, they did the same terminology when staking out train tracks is still used today.
That's interesting. It's a fascinating piece I didn't know. And I'm sure that many watching are curious about that model behind you.
Well, I don't see a model behind me. What?
Nothing back there.
Oh my God, where did that come from? Let's do that. They must have just did that when I was gone. So what about it? What are we curious about it?
Is it a
So
working model?
I don't know. Is it? I don't know if it works today. Here, let me show you around here. Uh-oh. Are you still there?
Still here. You're good.
Okay, unmute your speaker to increase volume to hear what? Can you hear me now?
Yes, we can hear you fine. We don't have your audio anymore now, Brian.
Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Am I here?
Yes, you are.
Okay. For some reason, when I unplug, let's hope it works better than my computer. But this ride was, it's pretty big. And funny story, I was working at Kings Island and having dinner with the Cincinnati roller coaster enthusiasts. Shout out to them. They are a very dedicated group. And they used to have dinners every Thursday or the first month. I think they still do. Unfortunately, I've had kids and have not been able to attend. Unfortunately, there was a passing of one of their members a year ago, Dave Cornell, and he was such a great guy. Anyways, I was having dinner with them, and this is part of the networking too. And Michael Graham, who's one of the owners and an owner of Coaster Dynamics, was sitting across from me. And it's just 2008 next year. I'm like, well, who doesn't know what we're getting next year? He's like, can we build a model for you? So I'm like, well, let me pitch it to the marketing guys. So I talked to Don Helbig, and Helbig's like, yeah, that's a good idea. And the day before we announced Diamondback, this huge model shows up on property. And it worked, and as they announced the ride, they veiled this model right by the Rivertown area, and it just was met with like this oh and ah, and so a lot of good things came out of that. We actually moved it to the there was underneath the International Restaurant, there was a big window set. And as you're leaving the park, you see this working model. In that off season, they wanted to move it to all these Myers and Kroger's and sell season passes. Well, this thing is not the most movable thing. I mean, it's seen better days because it used to have, right now it's running a half Silver Star, half Diamondback train. The kids, it's theirs now. And is I asked my wife pre-kids, if Kings Island let me have the model, would you let me have it? And she's fully like, yeah, go for it, Brian. Yeah, they'll never let him have it. The next day, it's in our basement. They actually reconfigured it to be the actual layout of the ride. Does it work? I don't know. We'll find out. It worked this morning. Sure somebody made that for me. I don't know what he's doing, but Ryan. Uh-oh, is it gonna make it? Probably not. Oh, we gotta roll back. Uh-oh. Now, it's ironic is this part of the ride actually has brakes on it, but not on this model. This here, my kids dared me that I could build They didn't believe I could build a coaster out of cardboard paper, poster board, but smash everything. And then this one, I don't have it plugged in, but that was when he was born. Come on, work. Oh, we did it. Am I still showing it? Up. I could not recreate the splashdown. So it, you know.
Well, and how bizarrely interconnected this whole industry is. We have an interview with Jack Reimer of Coaster Dynamics that'll be out on our YouTube later this month. We talked to Jack already.
Oh, really?
Yes.
Oh man, you could tell him I need a new rail. I've got a little bit of orange rail here, and that's like splintering rail. I need more rail.
You need some retracking.
I need some smoothing too, but it's not worth it right now because the kids are, you know, it's for one. I'm not even gonna say that. I don't think they'd let me. My kids would kill me. They would not let me. But we have all sorts of creations here. That is, I don't know what that is. I think he gave up. I don't know. There's a half done cyclone over here. This is the world I live in. And I made him clean up for this whole thing. This one's actually working here. One of the kids made that one. I don't know if you can see that. But I am. And I just plugged you back in, so I probably just muted you.
Oh, you're good.
Okay.
I can still hear you. So it really is all roller coasters at your house. It's fun to see that your kids have become integrated in the passion. Do you see them with the same passion? Are they starting to play roller coaster? Did you play Roller Coaster Tycoon? Are they starting to get their hands into it like that?
Roller Coaster Tycoon, low system. Okay, never mind. My computer's. Roller Coaster Tycoon was the easiest game I've ever played in my life. I would get like 99 on it. So, you know, I gave up about freshman year in college. You know, I was too good at it. It was always about running. I'm a marathon runner. It was always about running and roller coasters in high school. I haven't really changed much now, you know, but Roller Coaster Tycoon, I quit playing it because I kept getting 99 on it. It was like the kid, they were like, all right, your park's too good, Brian. We're not going to you anymore. So you've done everything you can, but they have not been into that yet. We're just, I think one of my buddies just started playing it at his house. So I think they know of it. I'm not a video game guy. I still play Mike Tyson's Punch Out. So we're not quite into those video games yet. So, but I'm sure it'll come. They have plenty of sketches. They keep all the park maps that I get from all around the world. The ones just starting to get on some roller coasters, like the older one, it just started riding the Beast last year, and some of the other ones at Kings Island, and he loves them. I couldn't get him on Vortex though. I tried, we really tried, but he wasn't quite ready for it yet. And my 7-year-old, even though he's 47 3/4 of an inch, we got some work to do. But they'll come around. Trust me. But they are fully aware of what I do. They ask me all the questions. We can't figure out right now. We looked online, and the Loch Ness Monster. My mother gave me a Loch Ness Monster Coaster Dynamics static, one of those little aluminum things, when she wrote it, and it's just a funny story there. But so she got me that, and Brody, my 9-year-old, put it together, and he you know, we looked up the stats on it. It's like 130 foot. I'm going to get yelled at here. You got to open this up because it's probably people out there ready to correct me. It's like 135 foot drop and it goes 60 miles per hour. Well, we looked at Vortex, and Vortex Go is 140 foot drop. So it was like a bigger hour. So we couldn't figure out how the Vortex goes slower than the Loch Ness Monster, yet the Loch Ness Monster is got a smaller drop. So we don't know. So if somebody could write on your Zoom group chat how that works, I think it's a marketing guy. Maybe I should ask Don Helbig. You know, Don, do you think they just, you know, ramp those up a little bit, you know, round up? That's what he says. Like, why didn't you round down? And I'm like, well, you want to round up if you're Busch Gardens in 1978 or whatever. So good question. I'm sorry, I'm ranting now. So
that mystical creature magic happening at Busch Gardens.
yes. They always had it. They rounded the Vortex for some reasons, not as fast. Can't figure that out.
Can't figure it out. Well, no. This is a great interview. I want to give everybody who's live on our Zoom a chance if they have any questions. If you have a question, you can go ahead and unmute yourself and ask. We'll give you a couple minutes for a few more questions, and then we're going to wrap up. But as I promised, this will be available afterwards to go back and watch the entirety on YouTube and Facebook. And if you're unable to unmute yourself, that I've set something wrong, feel free to put in the chat that you want to ask a question. I'll unmute you. We may have been very thorough and answered all their questions already. People have been asking throughout the evening, and thank you to my Facebook coordinator, Bill Linkenheimer, who's been translating them to me to make this an easy process. He's done a great job. All right, let's see if we have any more from Facebook.
Someone's got to have a question.
Let's see, we've gotten to a lot of these.
Not a question, but a thank you. Appreciate the time.
No problem, Jim.
I'm always the one breaking the chat up because no one's quiet.
This is Cy Kid in Washington, D.C., and I have a question for you. There are a couple coasters out there that are notoriously rough. One of them I just rode this past summer, the Predator at Darien Lake. Have anybody, have you approached anybody or taken the first, made the first approach to a park for a coaster that you have just known to be incredibly rough?
Do you know anyone who works?
I don't.
No, I'm not aware of, you know, so sometimes it's word of mouth that gets around on some of these things. But I'm not aware of anything from, I haven't been on the Predator in a long, long time. So if you know anybody there, I'd be more than willing to reach out and ask them if they want someone to look.
Buffalo area, so he may know someone who knows someone. So I'll definitely, because that coaster really needs help. Yeah.
Yeah, I haven't been on it in a long time. That's an old Summers coaster that it was gorgeous when it first opened up, right by the lake. And I think the Superman is around it now, but it's been a while.
So we have a question of where did the name Gravity Group come from?
I have no idea. I have no idea. That's a Chad Miller question. Someone once told me about it, and I think I fell asleep during the when they told me about it. It must not have been that interesting. I don't know. I'm sorry. I'm sure I should know, but I don't. It's a group of guys and they worked on Gravity, so I have no idea. I have no idea.
Gravity powered, and now y'all are all about airtime, so you're defying gravity. There's so much gravity going on.
Yeah.
Yes. So it's clear that you have a huge passion for parks. What is your favorite type of ride?
Besides the roller coaster?
Is it roller coasters?
Oh, yeah, of course it's roller coasters. I like steam trains though. I got to work the one at Kings Island for a year, and that was quite the. If you get to ride a steam train, go talk to the engineer of the steam train, and they'll love it. Steam engine than anything else. So just trying to break that thing, like by breaking, like stop. I can never hit the mark. I never could. I was like, you guys figure it out. I'm just here to learn. So
That's great. So what's your coaster count?
200. So it's been a while since COVID thing. I was 273 maybe. I'm such a dork for knowing that.
No, I'm there with you.
I think it's around 270. Where are you at? What are you at?
I'm just over 500.
Oh my goodness, 500?
And Brian, I'll tell you, I never thought. I remember Coaster Enthusiast saying that number, and I never thought in my life I would ride that many coasters. But I've been
where have you done 500 at? Like, is there? I have not been. Unfortunately, I've never been to like Six Flags Magic Mountain.
That's a big one.
Never been to Six Flags Great Adventure. Immediately, the couple parks. Even though I've been to Texas a ton of times. There's a lot of parks in Texas I haven't been to. Even though I go to Europe quite a bit, I have not been to Europa Park. That's definitely on my list of parks I really, really want to see. Unfortunately, even though I travel a lot, I don't get to have any time to myself when I travel. You're basically, you go your family. So things are a little different when you don't. I think now that the kids are getting a little bit more at age, I think it's going to be more. Because I think last year was my best count, just because we were all over, and now that they're starting to like the coasters, that'll help out.
It really does.
My wife, not so much. I don't think she could. She likes the Raptor at Cedar Point. But we'll see how she does on Orion. I don't think she likes the heights that much. So, but she'll still ride them. But now that I have a riding buddy with me all the time, and we'll go to Kings Island in the morning, ride Timbers, ride the Beast, make our way, ride the Race or Adventure Express, and then come home. I mean, I live 2 miles as the crow flies from the park. So lucky me.
That's exactly where I found my passion and where I became enthusiast was at Kings Island. I found Ace there and have grown my kids up through the club now. But that's exactly what we found, that once the kids were a little older, that's our family vacation. We hit the road. We have a full coaster trip. Now, usually we do Coaster Con as a family. So it really lets your coaster count go up quickly when you hit some of the bigger parks.
Where was Coaster Con going to be this year?
We were supposed to be in Eastern Pennsylvania at Hershey Park, Dorney Park, Dutch Wonderland, and Knoebels.
Oh, that would have been a fun one.
So that's what we're doing in 2021. We're only delaying it. We're not canceling it. So we'll be there. CoasterCon 43 will be in 2021. And we'll pick right back up with those parks. So looking forward to it. And so I look forward to heading up there with my family next year. But it's those big parks that let your count go up quickly. I know I've hit most of the big parks in the United States. I haven't gotten overseas as much as I have. I know Cy, who just spoke, has gotten some wonderful overseas trips. He's been some great places. He lives not too far from me, so have gotten to enjoy his pictures. But you can laugh talking about your kids getting into it. My son's next roller coaster will be his 300th. And so,
wow, he's beat me already.
He's anxiously awaiting.
Yeah, wow.
Which coaster will open first so that we can get a new coaster for 300.
I actually have the credit of the Crystal Beach Comet.
Great credit.
What it's called? Oh, and did you know it ran half the train backwards?
I did not.
Yeah, it ran half the train backwards when it was at Crystal Beach. And when I showed up, It was 1989. I was like 8 or 9, and the Magnum was the first. That was the year. And I remember waiting in line. My poor dad, we waited in line for the Magnum, 2 hours each. And I wrote it 3 times that day, and there was a big party that was going on in the line. But we made it to Crystal Beach because my dad saw it in the paper that ride was, the big thing. And I was too short when I got there to ride it. Like, it was a 52-inch ride. My dad, I swear to God, he ride operator, because I rode it once going forward and once going backward. The guy it's probably like this park's going out of business. There's no one in line. I don't care. So follow the rules, by the way, guys. Follow the rules. And I kind of look back at it. My dad was a bad father, but I have not been on I haven't been on it since it's moved to Crystal Beach yet, though. Or not Crystal Beach, Great Escape. So.
Oh, and one last question from the field, Brian. How can anyone get Gravity Group merchandise?
You'd have to. I don't think we have much. We've been so busy the last few years that we don't make any merchandise anymore. If you can, I don't know what would you guys like? I don't know.
Oh, you have to start commenting, put your messages in the chat. What do you want? Right.
T-shirts. I see T-shirts. Yeah. I mean, the parks all have good shirts. The Switchback is one of my favorites that I have. Danny could probably car wraps. Now that's funny. Yeah. Don't give him any ideas. Yeah. But if you want to email, feel free to send it to info@thegravity. I unfortunately do not, but face mask, that could work too. Yeah. But what if you're riding not one of our coasters and you're wearing a Gravity Group face mask? Then that could be kind of interesting. But I know we used to do coffee mugs and T-shirts, but we've just been so busy that we haven't had the opportunity. We're engineers. We're not marketing people.
Yeah.
So.
And we'd like you to be building roller coasters, not designing shirts, but we would love shirts, hats. We always love our swag.
Yeah.
Yes. Well, Brian, thank you so much. This was such a fun conversation, and I really enjoyed getting to know more about you and Gravity Group. I hope everybody else listening really enjoyed it also. And we hope everybody enjoys celebrating World Roller Coaster Appreciation Month, although our first one this year did not dispatch quite as planned. We've had some fun online with it, so we look forward to being in the parks next year for it. Yes.
It'll get back. We'll get back on the coaster. We're looking forward to it. So they're out there ready to roll. I know that. So
yes, we look forward to it. Well, thank you. Everybody have a great night, and thanks for joining us. And we hope you'll pop in for all that we have going on next week, because we're going to have CoasterCon at home, safe from our homes, with lots of fun activities featuring all those parks we talked about that we were supposed to be at for CoasterCon 43. So it's like a preview for 2021. So thanks, enthusiasts, and we hope you enjoy it. Good night, Brian.
Thank you, guys. Good night.